So the trains need headlights to see where they're going? No. Let me explain. Now, if you can remember back to the video where I talked about wagon colours, some brown ones, some grey ones and so on, I was talking about the fact that different wagon colours mean different things with regard to brakes. Trains that had more braked wagons, that's the brown ones, could go faster than trains who only had grey ones. And the speed of a train was nothing to do with how fast the engine could pull it. It was more to do with how quick the thing could stop if it had to. So hence, the more brakes you've got in the train, or the better brakes you've got, the faster the train could go. But how did signalmen and enginemen know how fast they were allowed to go? Well, the answer is in the working timetable. This is not the public timetable, the one that shows us when our train is coming. This is the one that's written for all the staff, that shows when all of the trains, freight and passenger, are running, and all of the notes that go with those trains, what they're allowed to carry, and more importantly for us here, how fast they're allowed to go. And how fast they're allowed to go is determined by the class of train that they are. Now, these codes were around long before British Railways. In fact, British Railways adopted a system that was being used by the LMS and LNER in part long before British Railways came into being, but they standardised it across the whole of the network, although the Southern tended to have their own system because they used discs for routes. The Great Western always walked their own path, and oddballs like the Somerset and Dorset tended only to have two codes, one for freight, one for passenger. But these were the standards, and you can see that the speed of the train is determined here by the class of train. So it goes from fastest to slowest. You've got the A class trains, express passenger, B class ordinary passenger, that's anything that isn't express, and then you've got the freights. You've got C, which is your parcels, fish, fruit, all the stuff they had to get there in a rush. D, well, that's perishables and livestock, perhaps not running quite as fast as C. E, more livestock or perishable, but again not running as fast. F, more livestock and perishable stuff, but an unfitted, that is no brakes on the train, express freight. G is engines on their own. H is a through freight, which essentially is anything that isn't an express. J is mineral or empty wagon trains that are just plodding along now. And K is a freight train or a mineral train that stops at intermediate stations, so the slowest of all trains. Now I come back to this picture that I used right at the start. My very warm thanks to Chris Nevard, whose layout this is and who's allowed me to use one or two of his pictures for the site. Nevard Media, check him out, Chris Nevard, wonderful builder, bit of a guitar player as well, so we have a number of things in common. But you'll see this is one of his trains sitting at a station with a single headlamp below the chimney. And if we go back to our list of trains, you'll see that that represents an ordinary passenger train. That is a train that is going to stop at some or all of the stations and not an express. And this brings us on to an important point, and that is that whilst there may well be all these types of trains, if you're building a certain type of line, you're not going to see all of these types of trains. Now, if like me you're building a secondary main line, then there's a chance that you're going to see some express passenger trains, but not very many. Most of your trains will be B class ordinary passenger trains. You might see the odd C class train because you might have parcels or fish as illustrated here. D is quite a rare thing. E tends to be the fastest of the trains that you'll see passing a secondary main line. Express freight. F, maybe less so, you might have some of those. G is obviously light engines. H, your through freights are going to run between one yard and another without really stopping anywhere and trundling along. J, mineral trains or empty trains, they're possible, and K will be your local pickup freight. If you're building a branch line, then you've got a totally different bag of tricks. If you're building a branch line, then you certainly won't see any express passenger trains, so all of your trains will be B ordinaries. You're unlikely to see parcels train, express freights of any kind. You may see some light engines. You were likely to see a mineral or empty wagon train perhaps, but more likely a K, branch freight or stopping freight. So you're really reduced to 3 different types of train. By the same token, if you're modelling the East Coast main line, if your shed's big enough, you'll probably see all of these. And I make no excuse for putting up this picture for a third time, because this is key to us operating our trains properly. We need to make sure that our trains are properly described, we have the correct lamps on the front, and that the consist of the train is right. So if it's an express, parcels or fish train, it clearly carries parcels and fish traffic. Now, there's always photographic evidence where you'll see trains, for argument's sake, under a J mineral or empty train heading, and it's carrying horse boxes and livestock because they're empty. So there's always examples of different things around. The point here is to identify the types of train that your layout will run, to run those types of trains, to have the right head codes on the front, to have the right consist in the train. Now, how do we know what the consist looks like? Well, that's a video for another day, but for now let me leave you with this picture of the head codes. I'll see you soon.